The distant howl of coyotes echoed across the barren plains as Eliza Blackwood stood at the edge of Redemption Creek. Moonlight silvered her dark hair, while townsfolk whispered behind shuttered windows about the cursed woman who brought drought and death wherever she went. What they didn't know was that beneath her threadbare shawl and weathered hands lay a secret that would change their little frontier town forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sheriff Mason Reed tipped his hat lower against the morning sun as he made his daily rounds through Redemption. At 34, his once bright future had dwindled to maintaining order in a dusty backwater that barely warranted a spot on Kansas. Territory maps. His deputy, young Billy Thorne, practically bounded alongside him with the enthusiasm that Mason had long since buried. "Heard Widow Jenkins got another chicken stolen last night," Billy said, fingering the badge he'd pinned to his vest just 3 months prior. "Reckon it's that Blackwood woman. Strange things always happen when she's around." Mason sighed. "Billy, we don't accuse folks without evidence. That's not how the law works. But Sheriff, everyone knows what they want to believe." Mason cut him off sharply. "I deal in facts, not gossip." The truth was, Mason had been watching Eliza Blackwood since she'd arrived in town 6 months ago, not because he suspected her of anything, but because something about her didn't add up. She spoke too properly for someone dressed in pauper's clothes. Her hands, though now rough from work, showed signs they once knew finer things. And sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, her posture shifted from humble to regal. In an instant, the saloon doors swung open, disgorging Jasper Montgomery, the wealthiest ranch owner in the county. His expensive boots kicked up dust as he approached. "Sheriff Reed," Montgomery called, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Just the man I needed to see." Mason nodded curtly. He'd never much cared for Montgomery, a man who measured worth by acres owned and cattle counted. "What can I help you with, Mr. Montgomery?" "It's about that Blackwood woman," Montgomery said, tugging at his silk waistcoat. "She's causing problems again. Mrs. Peterson claims her milk curdled after Eliza walked past her farm yesterday." Mason fought the urge to roll his eyes. "Mr. Montgomery, sour milk isn't a crime." "It ain't just that," Montgomery insisted, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Word is she's been seen prowling around at night, gathering strange plants by moonlight. Could be witchcraft. Or she could be collecting herbs for medicines," Mason countered. "Last I checked, gathering plants wasn't against the law either." Montgomery's face darkened. "You're not taking this seriously, Reed. People are scared. Something needs to be done about that woman." "And what would you have me do? Arrest her for walking at night? For picking plants?" Mason stood straighter, meeting Montgomery's gaze head-on. "If someone comes to me with actual evidence of a crime, I'll investigate. Until then, Mrs. Blackwood is entitled to live her life unmolested like any other citizen." As Montgomery stomped away, Mason caught sight of Eliza herself, moving quickly between buildings, clearly trying to avoid attention. The crowd parted around her like water flowing around a stone. Mothers pulling children close, men touching their hat brims not out of respect, but superstition. Mason frowned. He knew what it was to be an outsider. Before becoming sheriff, he'd drifted from town to town after the war, carrying ghosts no one else could see. He recognized that same haunted look in Eliza's eyes. "Sheriff?" Billy's voice broke through his thoughts. "You want me to keep an eye on her?" "No," Mason decided. "Suddenly, I'll speak with Mrs. Blackwood myself." He found her at the edge of town, in a tiny, ramshackle cabin she rented from old Mr. Gunderson. She was hanging laundry, her movements efficient and graceful despite the crude surroundings. "Mrs. Blackwood," he called, keeping a respectful distance. She turned, those unusual amber eyes widening slightly before her expression closed like a book snapping shut. "Sheriff Reed, have I broken some law I'm unaware of?" Her voice confirmed his suspicions, too refined, too educated for her apparent station. Up close, he noticed more incongruities. The way she held herself, the careful precision of her words. "No, ma'am, just checking that all is well with you. Some folks in town have been concerned about your nighttime activities." Something flashed in her eyes. Fear, perhaps, or calculation. "I suffer from sleeplessness, Sheriff. The night air helps. It'll clear my mind. And the plants you gather?" Her chin lifted slightly. "My mother taught me herbal remedies. I make tinctures and salves to ease my own ailments. Is that now prohibited in redemption?" "Not at all," Mason assured her, "but you might consider being less mysterious about it. People fear what they don't understand. People fear what they choose to fear, Sheriff Reed." A bitter smile touched her lips. "I've found that explaining myself rarely changes minds already set against me." Mason studied her, this woman who carried herself like a queen while living. "As an outcast, you know, Mrs. Blackwood, life might be easier if you shared a bit more about yourself, where you came from, what brought you to redemption, Her laugh was unexpected, soft but genuine. "What brought me here, Sheriff, was the hope of redemption itself. Isn't that what your town promises?" Before he could respond, a commotion erupted down the street. Billy was running toward them, face flushed. "Sheriff, come quick. There's been an incident at the bank." Mason tipped his hat to Eliza. "We'll continue this conversation another time, Mrs. Blackwood." As he turned to leave, she called after him, "You won't find what you're looking for, Sheriff, not about me." The bank incident turned out to be nothing more than a drunken cowboy mistaking the day of his payment, but by the time Mason returned to Eliza's cabin, she was gone. Only the laundry remained, fluttering in the breeze like pale flags of surrender. That evening, as shadows lengthened across Redemption's main street, Mason sat on the jailhouse porch, watching Jasper Montgomery emerge from his weekly meeting with the town council. The rancher's satisfied smile set alarm bells ringing in Mason's mind. "What's Montgomery looking so pleased about?" he asked Mayor Hoffman, who was passing by. The portly mayor hesitated. "Well, the council's decided it's time to address the Blackwood situation." "What situation?" Mason stood up slowly. "Has she committed some crime I'm unaware of?" "Not exactly." Hoffman fidgeted with his watch chain. "But the town's suffering, Mason. Crops failing, livestock sickening. Folks need someone to blame. So you've chosen an innocent woman. Now, Mason, no one said she's guilty of anything, but Montgomery made a generous proposal, said he'd take her off our hands." Mason went cold. "Take her off your hands? She's not property to be disposed of." "Of course not," Hoffman hurried to add. "He's offered to marry her, says a husband's guidance might settle her down, make her respectable. Council thinks it's a fine solution." "And did anyone ask Mrs. Blackwood what she thinks of this arrangement?" Hoffman looked away. "Montgomery's speaking with her now." Mason was moving before the mayor finished his sentence, striding toward Eliza's cabin with long, urgent steps. He found them in her small garden, Montgomery looming over her, his hand gripping her arm. "Won't find a better offer," Montgomery was saying. "A woman like you, with your reputation, you should be grateful." "Remove your hand, Mr. Montgomery." Eliza's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "You're not understanding me, woman. This isn't a request. The council's decided. Is there a problem here?" Mason interrupted, hand resting on his holstered gun. Montgomery released Eliza's arm, but didn't step back. "No problem, Sheriff. Just explaining to Mrs. Blackwood her good fortune. She's to become the new Mrs. Montgomery." "Against my explicit refusal," Eliza said, rubbing her arm where Montgomery's fingers had dug in. Mason positioned himself between them. "Mr. Montgomery, I believe the lady has declined your proposal." "This doesn't concern you, Reed," Montgomery snarled. The council's made its decision. She'll marry me or she'll leave Redemption tonight. On what grounds can you force a citizen from their home? Mason demanded. Montgomery smiled unpleasantly. Public nuisance ordinance, signed into law just this afternoon. Mason looked to Eliza, expecting outrage, but found her oddly calm, almost calculating, as she studied Montgomery. And if I were to accept your proposal, she said carefully, what exactly would that entail? Montgomery straightened his vest. You'd want for nothing material. My ranch is the finest in the territory. In return, you'd bear my name, keep my house, and give me sons. Mason felt sick at the transaction being laid out so boldly, but Eliza merely nodded. I see. And the accusations against me, the whispers of curses and witchcraft, those would stop? Once you're under my protection, no one would dare, Montgomery assured her, mistaking her questions for acquiescence. Eliza's eyes met Mason's briefly, and he saw something there that chilled him, not defeat, but determination. She was playing some game he couldn't fathom. Very well, Mr. Montgomery, she said finally. I accept your proposal on one condition. Montgomery frowned. You're hardly in a position to make conditions. Nevertheless, I have one. The wedding must take place at midnight, 3 days from now, under the full moon. Midnight? Montgomery scoffed. What nonsense is this? Those are my terms. Accept them or find yourself another bride. Her voice was firm, uncompromising. Montgomery studied her suspiciously, then laughed. Midnight it is. Perhaps you are a witch after all, Mrs. Blackwood. No matter, I'll tame whatever wildness remains in you. As he strode away, Mason turned to Eliza in disbelief. You can't seriously be considering this? Her amber eyes were unreadable in the fading light. I have my reasons, Sheriff Reed. He'll destroy you, Mason warned. Montgomery doesn't want a wife, he wants a possession. You presume to know what I can withstand, she replied softly. I assure you, I've faced worse than Jasper Montgomery. Mason stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then run, tonight. I'll give you a head start. She shook her head. This is one story that cannot be escaped, only seen through to its end. What? Aren't you telling me? He demanded. For a moment her mask slipped, and he glimpsed something ancient and fierce behind her eyes. Everything, Sheriff Reed? I'm not telling you everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That night, Mason couldn't sleep. He paced his small quarters behind the jailhouse, thinking of Eliza's face when she'd accepted Montgomery's proposal. There had been no fear there, only a cold calculation that unsettled him more than terror would have. Just past midnight, he found himself walking toward her cabin again. A light still burned inside, and through the window he could see her bent over something on the table, papers covered in strange symbols and what looked like a map. He was about to knock when she suddenly straightened, gathering the papers. Hurriedly, she moved to the fireplace and threw them in, watching intently as they burned. When she turned toward the window, Mason stepped back into the shadows, but not before he saw her face transformed in the firelight. Gone was the humble, persecuted woman the town knew. In her place stood someone else entirely, someone with purpose and power, someone with secrets worth hiding. As he slipped away into the darkness, Mason Reed knew with absolute certainty that Eliza Blackwood was not who she claimed to be. But then again, neither was he. Dawn broke over Redemption with the color of a badly bruised peach. Mason sat on the jailhouse steps, his coffee gone cold beside him, watching townsfolk hurry about their morning business with an unusual energy. Word of Montgomery's upcoming. Midnight wedding had spread faster than wildfire in dry grass. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sheriff? Billy appeared at his elbow, clutching a telegram. This just came for you. Ryder said it was urgent. Mason broke the seal, his expression hardening as he read. He'd sent inquiries about Eliza Blackwood to contacts back east after their first meeting. Now, finally, came a response. But instead of answers, it only deepened the mystery. No record of any Eliza Blackwood matching your description in Boston, New York, or Philadelphia, it read. However, 3 months ago, royal emissary from Ravenhurst Kingdom reported their Princess Elizabeth vanished during Atlantic crossing. Physical description matches your inquiry. Considered matter of highest diplomatic sensitivity. Advise extreme uncaution. Mason folded the telegram carefully, tucking it inside his vest pocket. Ravenhurst, a small but wealthy European kingdom known for its ancient royal lineage and vast mineral deposits. He'd read about it during the war, when their weapons had turned the tide for the Union. "Everything all right, Sheriff?" Billy asked, eyeing him curiously. "Fine," Mason lied. "Just some old business catching up to me." He stood, dusting off his trousers. "I'll be making rounds. Keep an eye on things here." The Mercantile was buzzing with gossip when Mason entered. Mrs. Peterson and the banker's wife fell silent at his approach, but old Sam Willoughby had no such restraint. "Morning, Sheriff." "Heard the news? Montgomery's finally taking himself a bride, and the cursed woman, no less." Sam cackled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Reckon he's either the bravest man in Kansas or the most foolhardy." "Or the most calculating," Mason muttered. "Beg pardon?" Sam cupped a hand to his ear. "Nothing." Mason turned to the shopkeeper. "I need paper, ink, and whatever books you might have on European geography." The shopkeeper's eyebrows rose, but he gathered the requested items without comment. As Mason paid, he caught sight of Montgomery across the street, surrounded by fawning townsmen. The rancher was describing something with expansive gestures, his gold watch chain glinting in the morning sun. "Already telegraphed for special. Crates from St. Louis," Montgomery was saying. "Once the marriage is official, I intend to begin shipping immediately." "Shipping what?" Mason wondered aloud. The shopkeeper followed his gaze. "Haven't you heard? Montgomery's found silver on his property. That's why he's been buying up land all around. The wedding's just him securing the last piece." "What does Mrs. Blackwood have to do with land rights?" The shopkeeper lowered his voice. "That cabin she rents from Gunderson sits on the old Spencer claim. Worthless scrub, most thought, but turns out it's right where Montgomery needs to build his sluice. Works. Old Gunderson won't sell to Montgomery on account of some ancient grudge, but if the woman living there becomes Mrs. Montgomery—" He let the implication hang. Mason felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. This wasn't about superstition or propriety. It was about greed, plain and simple. But how did a missing princess fit into all this? The answer came sooner than expected. As Mason left the Mercantile, he spotted Eliza herself, walking purposefully toward the telegraph office. Moving on instinct, he followed, keeping his distance until she emerged several minutes later, her expression grim but resolved. When she turned down the narrow alley beside the barber shop, Mason made his move. "Sending messages to Ravenhurst, Your Highness," he said quietly, stepping from the shadows. Eliza went perfectly still, only her eyes betraying a momentary flash of alarm before her features composed themselves. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sheriff," she said, but the slight accent that had always seemed out of place was suddenly more pronounced. Mason withdrew the telegram from his vest. "Princess Elizabeth, presumed lost at sea. Except you weren't lost, were you? You were running." Her shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, more refined, carrying the weight of command, despite her whispered tone. "Who else knows? No one. Yet." Mason studied her face, seeing it anew. The high cheekbones, the proud set of her jaw, features of nobility now obvious once he knew to look for them. "Why is a princess hiding in Redemption, Kansas, allowing herself to be maligned as a witch and forced into marriage with a silver-hungry rancher. Her laugh held no humor. You think I'm allowing anything? I've been trapped here without resources, without allies, watching for any opportunity to escape. Escape from what? Your royal duties. From marriage to a monster, she hissed, eyes flashing. Duke Vladislav of Krovgorod, a man 3 times my age, who's already buried 2 young wives. Under suspicious circumstances. Our countries have been enemies for generations, but suddenly this marriage alliance became paramount. When I objected, I was told duty must come before personal wishes. Mason frowned. So you fled your own wedding only to end up in another. The irony isn't lost on me. She glanced nervously toward the street, but Montgomery's proposal solved one immediate problem. With his name, I gain protection from immediate deportation should I be discovered. The midnight ceremony buys me time for my allies to respond to my telegram. What allies? The Ravenhurst Royal Guard has agents throughout America. I've finally managed to contact them. They'll be here by week's end. Mason stepped closer, lowering his voice. And what happens at midnight? You can't seriously intend to go through with this marriage. For the first time, a genuine smile touched her lips. Sheriff Reed, in my kingdom, royal weddings follow ancient traditions. One of those traditions requires the bride to present her groom with a ceremonial cup of wine before vows are exchanged, a symbol of the sustenance they will provide each other. Understanding dawned. You're going to drug him. She nodded. A sleeping draft only, enough to create confusion and delay until help arrives. Mason ran a hand through his hair. This is madness. If Montgomery suspects, he suspects nothing, except that I'm giving in to his demands out of desperation. Her expression hardened. Men like Montgomery and Duke Vladislav share the same weakness. They believe themselves untouchable, their desires unquestionable. A shout from the main street interrupted them. Billy was calling Mason's name, his young voice cracking with urgency. I have to go, Mason said, but hesitated. Princess Eliza, she corrected firmly. Until I leave this place, I remain Eliza Blackwood. Eliza, then. This plan of yours is dangerous. More dangerous than being forced into a kingmaker marriage with a man who sees me only as a diplomatic pawn. She shook her head. I've spent my life being told what a princess must sacrifice for her kingdom. For once, I'm choosing my own path. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By afternoon, Montgomery's ranch was a hive of activity. Wagons delivered lumber and supplies, while workers erected a canopy where the midnight ceremony would take place. Mason observed it all from horseback, noting the armed men who seemed more focused on watching the perimeter than preparing for a wedding. Quite the spectacle came. A voice beside him. Gunderson, Eliza's landlord, had ridden up on his ancient mule. The old man spat tobacco juice into the dust. Montgomery never does anything small. You refused to sell him your land, Mason remarked. That I did. Gunderson's weathered face creased in a scowl. My Jenny's buried on that property. Promised her I'd never let it go. Mason studied the old man. Did you know about the silver? Course I knew. Why do you think Montgomery's been trying to buy me out these past 2 years? Gunderson hawked and spat again. Jenny and me came here with nothing but dreams. Land might be worth something now, but my word to her is worth more. Is that why you rented to Mrs. Blackwood, to keep Montgomery at bay? Gunderson's eyes narrowed shrewdly. Smart woman, that one. Came to me direct, offered cash money when everyone else in town wanted nothing to do with her. Said she needed just a few months' sanctuary. The old man chuckled. Figured anyone who got under Montgomery's skin was a friend of mine. Mason turned his horse toward town. Ever notice anything unusual about your tenant? Besides them fancy words and the way she holds herself like she's wearing a crown instead of a shawl. Gunderson cackled. Sheriff, I wasn't born yesterday. Don't know exactly what her story is, but I know quality when I see it. Whatever game she's playing with Montgomery, my money's on her. Back in town, Mason found Billy waiting with news that sent a chill through him. Telegram came for Montgomery, the deputy reported. After he read it, he sent riders out in every direction and doubled the men watching Mrs. Blackwood's cabin. What did the telegram say? Billy shook his head. Don't know exactly, but I overheard him telling his foreman to secure the asset and move up the timetable. Something's got him spooked. Mason cursed under his breath. Montgomery must have received word about Eliza's true identity, perhaps from the same sources that had responded to Mason's inquiries. Where is he now? Mason demanded. Headed to the Blackwood woman's cabin with that preacher from the mining camp, the one with the wandering eye. Not Reverend Mills? The town's regular preacher was a stickler for propriety. No, sir, this one's new. Calls himself Brother Silas. Billy hesitated. Sheriff, they were carrying ropes. Mason didn't wait to hear more. He rode hard for Eliza's cabin, dust billowing behind him. He found her door splintered, the small home ransacked. Of Eliza herself there was no sign except a single hairpin bearing a tiny crest, a raven clutching a ruby. As Mason stood in the ruined cabin, pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Montgomery had never intended to wait for the midnight ceremony. Now that he knew who Eliza really was, she'd become far too valuable to risk losing. The princess hadn't been fleeing from her royal duties after all. She'd been kidnapped. Dusk painted Redemption's weathered buildings in hues of amber and blood as Mason gathered what he needed from the jailhouse. His Winchester rifle, extra ammunition, and the badge he'd worn since taking the oath to protect this town. That oath had never felt heavier than it did now. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. You can't go alone, Billy insisted, trailing after him like a determined shadow. Montgomery's got at least 20 men out there, which is why you're staying here. Mason checked his Colt, spinning the cylinder before holstering it. Someone needs to maintain order in town. But Sheriff, no arguments, Billy. Mason's voice softened. If I don't come back by morning, ride to Fort Hayes. Tell them everything. The E. Young deputy swallowed hard. Everything about what? You haven't told me anything. Mason paused, weighing his words carefully. Mrs. Blackwood isn't who everyone thinks she is. She's a foreign dignitary, a princess who I believe was kidnapped and has been hiding here. Now Montgomery's taken. Her probably planning to ransom her back to her kingdom. Billy's eyes widened. A real princess? In Redemption? Yes, and if Montgomery gets away with this, it could cause an international incident. Mason grabbed his duster from the hook by the door. That's why I need you here. If things go wrong, the army needs to know. Outside, hoofbeats approached. Mason peered through the window to see old Gunderson dismounting awkwardly from his mule. Knew you'd be getting ready to do something foolish, the old man said without preamble when Mason opened the door. He thrust a folded paper into the sheriff's hands. Map of Montgomery's property. Jenny's brother worked there before the war. Shows all the old mine tunnels Montgomery's been reopening. Mason unfolded it, studying the crisscrossing lines. Why are you helping me? Gunderson's rheumy eyes narrowed. Told you. That woman paid cash for her lodging. Cash with this on it. He fished in his pocket, producing a gold coin. In the fading light, Mason could make out the profile of a woman wearing a crown, surrounded by foreign script. Been saving it as a curiosity, Gunderson continued. Figured if she was important enough to have her face on money, she was important enough to help. Mason pocketed the map. Thank you, Gunderson nodded once. Montgomery's keeping her at the old overseer's house, separate from the main ranch. Less prying eyes that way? How do you know that? The old man's mouth twisted in a half-smile. Your deputy ain't the only one who can listen when folks think no one's paying attention. As Mason prepared to leave, Billy suddenly grabbed his arm. Wait, take this. He unpinned his deputy badge, pressing it into Mason's palm. My pa always said 2 badges scare a man more than 1. The simple gesture caught Mason off guard. He closed his fingers around the badge, nodding his thanks, before slipping it into his pocket alongside the princess's hairpin. Night had fully claimed the land by the time Mason approached Montgomery's property. He'd left his horse a mile back, continuing on foot to avoid detection. The overseer's house sat on a low rise, lamplight glowing from its windows. 2 armed men patrolled the perimeter, rifles gleaming dully in the moonlight. Mason circled wide, using the terrain for cover. According to Gunderson's map, an old mine ventilation shaft emerged just behind the house, a potential entry point if he could locate it in the darkness. He found it half collapsed and barely wide enough for a man's shoulders, hidden beneath years of overgrowth. Taking a deep breath, Mason began to squeeze through inch by painful inch, cool earth pressing against him from all sides. The shaft widened after several claustrophobic minutes, allowing him to move more freely. Distant voices guided him through. The darkness, men arguing, their words echoing against stone walls. Not what we agreed. The first voice was unfamiliar, tinged with a foreign accent. She was to be delivered intact, unharmed. She's not harmed, Montgomery's distinctive drawl. Just secured. These precautions became necessary when she attempted contact with her countrymen. The Duke will not be pleased with these complications. The Duke can take his displeasure and... Montgomery was interrupted by the sound of a door opening. Sir, the priest is ready, came a third voice. Good, bring her. The sooner this marriage is formalized, the sooner our guest can transport her. To Krovgorod, with all legal documentation in order. Mason froze. They weren't planning a ransom, they were completing the very forced marriage Eliza had fled from. But why would Montgomery agree to this when the silver mine offered so much wealth? The answer came in the foreign agent's next words. Remember our arrangement, Montgomery. Once the princess becomes Duchess of Krovgorod, her land's in the black. Mountain Pass transfer to her husband. The Duke has agreed to lease those mineral rights exclusively to your company for 50 years. Worth 10 times what this paltry silver deposit could produce, Montgomery replied smugly. I'll be the wealthiest man west of the Mississippi. Mason followed the voices, emerging from the mine tunnel into a root cellar. Carefully, he climbed worn wooden steps, finding himself in a kitchen. The house was small, but solidly built, with thick walls that muffled sound. He eased toward the front rooms, staying low. Through a doorway, he glimpsed what had once been a parlor, now transformed for an unholy ceremony. Brother Silas, a sallow-faced man with a pronounced squint, stood before a makeshift altar, thumbing through a prayer book with obvious disinterest. Montgomery and the foreign agent, a pale man with a waxed mustache and military bearing, waited impatiently. 2 guards entered, half dragging Eliza between them. She'd been dressed in what was probably the finest gown Montgomery could procure. On short notice, pale blue silk that might have been beautiful if not for the circumstances. Her hands were bound before her with silken cords that matched the dress, a grotesque parody of bridal preparation. Despite her bonds and the bruise darkening one cheek, she maintained the regal posture Mason had noticed from their first meeting. Even now, being brought to her own forced wedding, Princess Elizabeth refused to cower. Ah, my reluctant bride, Montgomery said, moving to take her bound hands in his. I apologize for the accelerated timeline, but it seems your royal guardsmen are more efficient than anticipated. We've had word they'll reach redemption by morning. Then you're already defeated, Eliza said, her accent now fully revealed in her anger. When my father learns of this, your father will learn only what the Duke wishes him to know. The foreign agent interrupted smoothly. That his daughter, overcome by pre-wedding nerves, fled her escort during the Atlantic crossing. How fortunate that her betrothed's agents found her, confused and suffering exposure in this primitive wilderness. Mason had heard enough. Checking that his gun was ready, he prepared to make his move, but froze as the front door burst open. "Sheriff, you in there?" Billy's voice rang out, followed by the young deputy himself, brandishing his pistol with more enthusiasm than skill. "I've come to—" He never finished. One of Montgomery's men clubbed him from behind, sending him crashing to the floor unconscious. "Well, well," Montgomery drawled, reaching for his own weapon. "Seems we have an uninvited guest. Search the house." Mason backed into the shadows, mind racing. Billy's ill-timed rescue attempt had ruined any element of surprise, but it had also created confusion he could use. As Montgomery's men spread out to search the premises, Mason slipped behind a heavy curtain near the parlor's entrance. "Proceed with the ceremony immediately," Montgomery ordered the priest. "We'll deal with the sheriff afterward." Brother Silas cleared his throat nervously. The traditional word, sir? Whatever will make it legal. Skip the unnecessary parts." The ceremony began, a mockery of sacred rites. From his hiding place, Mason could see Eliza's face, pale but composed, as she was forced to stand before her captors. When prompted for her response, she remained silent, earning a painful squeeze of her arm from Montgomery. "She accepts," Montgomery said for her. "Continue." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mason's opportunity came when one of the searching men entered the kitchen, creating a brief diversion. In that moment he stepped from behind the curtain, pistol raised. "This wedding's over," he announced, his voice carrying the full authority of his office. Montgomery whirled, surprisingly fast for a man his size, his own gun, clearing its holster. "Sheriff Reed, I suspected you might come calling, always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." "Release her," Mason ordered, gesturing toward Eliza with his gun barrel. "Now." "I'm afraid I can't do that." Montgomery's smile never reached. His eyes— "You see, this is a matter of international diplomacy now, beyond your jurisdiction. Kidnapping and forced marriage are crimes in any jurisdiction. Is it kidnapping to return a runaway bride to her rightful betrothed?" The foreign agent stepped forward, his accent more pronounced in his agitation. "This woman is the property of Krogorod by treaty." "I am the property of no one." Eliza's voice rang out clear and commanding. "I am Princess Elizabeth of Ravenhurst, and I denounce the treaty signed under duress and threat of war." The room fell silent for a heartbeat. Then Montgomery laughed, an ugly, dismissive sound. "Princess or pauper makes no difference here. In this territory, a woman needs a husband's protection." He gestured toward the priest. "Continue." "Take one more step and I'll put a bullet in you," Mason warned, his aim steady on Montgomery's chest. "You're outnumbered, Sheriff." Montgomery nodded toward the doorway, where his men had gathered, weapons trained on Mason. "Even you can't outdraw 5 guns." Mason felt the odds shifting against him, but held his ground. "Maybe not. But I'll make sure you're the first to fall." A tense standoff followed, broken only when Billy groaned from his position on the floor, beginning to regain consciousness. "Kill them both," the foreign agent said coldly. "We have a boat waiting at the river port. Once we cross into Indian territory, there will be no pursuit." Montgomery raised his hand, signaling his men to prepare to fire, when Eliza suddenly lurched forward, throwing herself against him. The movement caught Montgomery off guard, sending both of them staggering. In the confusion, Mason fired, his bullet catching one of Montgomery's men in the shoulder. Chaos erupted. Montgomery backhanded Eliza, sending her crashing into the makeshift altar. The foreign agent drew a small, pearl-handled revolver, aiming at Mason. Billy, still dazed, managed to tackle one gunman at the knees, bringing him down in a tangle of Limbs, gunfire exploded in the confined space, deafening and disorienting. Mason felt a bullet graze his arm, hot pain slicing through muscle. He returned fire, dropping another of Montgomery's men, then rolled behind an overturned table for cover. Through gun smoke and confusion, he spotted Eliza. Still bound, she had somehow gotten hold of a decorative letter opener from a side table and was sawing frantically at her bonds. Montgomery, seeing her attempt to free herself, lunged toward her. "You royal bitch!" Mason fired again, but his chamber clicked empty. With no time to reload, he launched himself at Montgomery, driving the larger man away from Eliza. They crashed into the wall, paintings and plaster falling around them as they grappled for control. Montgomery was stronger, fueled by rage and thwarted ambition. He slammed Mason against a doorframe, stars exploding behind the sheriff's eyes. As his vision dimmed, Mason felt Montgomery's hands close around his throat. "I'll kill you slowly," Montgomery snarled, spittle flying from his lips. "Then I'll make your princess watch while I kill that boy deputy of yours." Darkness crept at the edges of Mason's consciousness, his lungs burning for air. With his remaining strength, he reached into his pocket, fingers closing around Billy's deputy badge. He withdrew it, and in one desperate move, drove its sharp pin deep into Montgomery's eye. The rancher's scream was primal as he released Mason, clutching at his face. Blood streamed between his fingers as he staggered backward, colliding with the foreign agent who had been trying to reach Eliza. Mason fell to his knees, gulping air into his starved lungs. Through blurred vision, he saw Eliza finally free her. Hands. She moved with startling speed for someone who had been bound moments before, snatching the foreign agent's dropped revolver. "Don't move," she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of generations of royal authority. "Any of you." Montgomery, still howling in pain, lunged blindly toward the sound of her voice. Without hesitation, Eliza fired. The bullet took Montgomery in the chest, stopping him mid-stride. He stood frozen for an impossible moment, disbelief etched on his features, before crumpling to the floor. The remaining men, seeing their employer fall, threw down their weapons. "Princess," the foreign agent began, his tone placating, "this unfortunate incident is an act of war." Eliza finished for him, the gun unwavering in her hand. "Tell your duke that if any agent of Krovgorod comes within 1,000 miles of me again, Ravenhurst will consider it a declaration of hostilities." Sirens wailed in the distance, Fort Hayes responding to Billy's message after all. Mason struggled to his feet, moving to stand beside Eliza. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "Nothing that won't heal." Her eyes remained fixed on the foreign agent. "My father once told me that a ruler must sometimes show mercy and sometimes show steel. Today called for steel." As soldiers flooded into the house, securing the scene and the remaining conspirators, Mason noticed how naturally Eliza assumed command, issuing orders that were instantly obeyed despite her disheveled appearance. "The Ravenhurst delegation will arrive by morning," she informed the fort commander. "Until then, these men are to be held under guard. This one," she indicated the foreign agent, "is a spy who has committed acts of aggression against a sovereign ally of the United States." Later, as dawn broke over the eastern hills, Mason found Eliza standing alone on the overseer's house porch. She'd discarded the blue silk dress in favor of a soldier's loaned jacket over her simple shift. Somehow, she looked more regal in these borrowed clothes than she had in the finery Montgomery had forced upon her. "Your Highness," Mason said, joining her at the railing. "Eliza," she corrected him with a small smile. "For a few more hours at least, the cursed woman of redemption, a useful disguise, though not one I would have chosen." She gazed toward the horizon. "People fear what they don't understand. Montgomery used that fear to isolate me, making me easier to control until his co-conspirators arrived." "How did you end up in redemption in the first place?" Her expression darkened. I was indeed traveling to meet my betrothed when I learned the truth about him, that the marriage was merely a pretext to gain control of our mountain passes and their mineral deposits. When I tried to send word to my father, the Duke's men on our ship attempted to drug me into compliance, so you escaped. I jumped ship near Boston Harbor and fled west, hoping to lose myself in the vastness of your country until I could safely contact my family." She sighed. "I never imagined the Duke's reach extended so far, or that local greed would entangle me further." Mason studied her profile, seeing both the princess and the woman he'd come to admire. "What happens now?" "Now I return home, with a diplomatic incident to explain and a neighboring duchy to hold accountable." Her fingers brushed lightly over the bruise on her cheek. "And perhaps a new perspective on what it means to rule. Will you be safe?" Her smile held a new edge. "After this? I believe the Duke of Krovgorod will find me a much more formidable opponent than he anticipated." The sound of approaching horses announced the arrival of the Ravenhurst delegation. A dozen men in formal uniforms, topped with distinctive raven-crested helmets, rode toward the house, their formation precise even after a hard journey. Eliza straightened, her transformation from fugitive to royal completing before Mason's eyes. "Sheriff Reed," she said formally, though her eyes held warmth, "my country owes you a debt that cannot easily be repaid." "Just doing my job, Your Highness." Nevertheless, she reached up, unpinning a small silver raven from the borrowed jacket's collar, a token he hadn't noticed before. "In Ravenhurst, this signifies royal protection. Should you ever find yourself in my kingdom, present it and you will be welcomed as my personal friend." As she pressed it into his palm, their fingers touched briefly. In that moment, Mason saw not the princess returning to her duties, but the woman who had faced down superstition and danger with equal courage. The delegation dismounted, their leader dropping to one knee before Eliza. "Your Highness, thank God we've found you. The king has been beside himself with worry." "Rise, Captain," she commanded. "Prepare your men. We leave within the hour." As the royal guardsmen bustled about, securing horses and preparing for the journey, Eliza turned to Mason one last time. "Perhaps someday," she began, then stopped herself. "No. We both have our duties, our separate worlds." Mason nodded, understanding the unspoken. "Some stories aren't meant to be continued, but they can still be remembered." She touched his badge lightly, her royal reserve softening for a final moment. The princess and the sheriff, rather unconventional, wouldn't you say? No more unconventional than a cursed woman who turned out to be a queen-in-waiting. Her laughter, bright and genuine, caught the attention of her guardsmen. "I shall miss your American directness, Sheriff Reed." The captain approached, bowing. "Your Highness, we are ready." Eliza nodded, her expression becoming once more the cool mask of royalty. Without another word to Mason, she allowed herself to be escorted to a horse prepared with a side saddle. The princess mounted with practiced grace, looking every inch the royal, despite her makeshift attire. As the delegation formed around her, she cast one last glance at Mason, a look that spoke of paths not taken and words left unsaid. Then, with a command from their captain, the Ravenhurst Guard moved out, taking with them the woman who had brought both curse and blessing to redemption, and blessing to redemption, and bless. 2 weeks passed before redemption began to settle back into its rhythms. The saloon piano played late into evenings again, the mercantile reopened after repairs, and folks tipped their hats to Mason on his morning rounds, just as before. But beneath the familiar surface, everything had changed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mason sat at his desk, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold, while examining the silver raven pin in his palm. The morning light caught its delicate craftsmanship, each feather distinct, the tiny ruby eye seemingly alive with an inner fire. A token from another world, one he would likely never see. Billy bustled in, his arm still bandaged, but his spirit undimmed by their ordeal. The boy wore his reinstated deputy badge with even greater pride now, polishing it daily as if it might summon another adventure. "Mail's here," Billy announced, dropping several envelopes on the desk, including something mighty official-looking. The letter bore a wax seal, a raven clutching a ruby. Mason broke it carefully, unfolding thick parchment covered in elegant script. "Sheriff Mason Reed, word of your courageous intervention has reached His Majesty King Frederick IV of Ravenhurst. By royal decree, you are hereby awarded the Order of the Raven's Wing, our kingdom's highest honor for those who have rendered exceptional service to the crown. Additionally, His Majesty extends an invitation for you to visit the royal court, at your convenience, where proper recognition of your actions may be bestowed." The diplomatic pouch accompanying this letter contains a monetary expression of our gratitude, to be used at your discretion. Princess Elizabeth sends her personal regards and has instructed me to inform you that she has successfully negotiated the dissolution of the proposed alliance with Krovgorod. With deepest appreciation, Lord Chancellor. Armand Blackwell. Mason refolded the letter, his expression unreadable as he pushed aside a smaller pouch that had accompanied it, heavy with what could only be gold. "Well?" Billy pressed, practically bouncing with curiosity. "What's it say? Is it from her, the princess?" "It's from her government," Mason replied, tucking the letter into his vest pocket alongside the silver raven. "Just official thanks." Billy's face fell in disappointment. "That's all? After everything? What did you expect, Deputy? Royal carriages and glass slippers?" Mason tried for a smile, but couldn't quite manage it. "That's not how real life works." The door opened, admitting Mayor Hoffman, his usual bluster subdued since Montgomery's death had revealed the extent of corruption in Redemption's council. "Sheriff," Hoffman nodded, twisting his hat in pudgy hands. "Got a moment?" Mason gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Town council met this morning," Hoffman began, settling his considerable bulk into the creaking chair. "Lot of changes coming. About time," Mason remarked dryly. "Yes, well," Hoffman cleared his throat. "First order of business was addressing Montgomery's properties. Seems without a will or heirs, most reverts to territorial control." "And the silver mine?" "Territorial geologist says it's not as extensive as Montgomery claimed. Might sustain. A small operation for a few years, but nothing like the wealth he boasted of." Hoffman's jowls quivered with what might have been a suppressed laugh. "Seems he was leveraging a modest find into a grand scheme." Mason wasn't surprised. Men like Montgomery always inflated their prospects. What about Gunderson's land? The cabin where the princess was staying? "That's actually why I'm here." Hoffman extracted a folded document from his jacket. "This arrived by special courier yesterday. Deed transfer, signed by Princess Elizabeth herself, granting full ownership of that parcel to old Gunderson, free and clear. Includes a royal proclamation that his wife's resting place is to remain undisturbed in perpetuity." Mason felt a smile tug at his lips. Her first act upon returning home had been to ensure justice for the old man who'd helped her. "There's more," Hoffman continued. "Council voted unanimously to offer you a new contract. Double your current salary, extended term." "Why?" Mason asked, genuinely surprised. 2 weeks ago, half the council wanted me gone for interfering with Montgomery's business." Hoffman had the grace to look embarrassed. "Let's just say recent events have clarified the kind of leadership Redemption needs." He laid the contract on the desk. "Town's growing, Mason. Railroads coming through next year. We need a sheriff who stands on principle, not in someone's pocket." After Hoffman departed, Billy studied Mason's face. "You gonna take it?" Mason fingered the silver raven pin. Not sure, because of her. Billy's perception sometimes surprised him. The princess? It's complicated. Don't seem complicated to me, Billy shrugged. She's a princess bound for a throne. You're a sheriff bound to redemption. Sometimes stories end where they need to, not where we want. Mason raised an eyebrow. When did you get so wise? Been reading those dime novels you confiscated? Billy grinned. Even bad stories teach something. Mason laughed, his first genuine laugh since that night at Montgomery's ranch. The sound felt foreign but welcome, like an old friend returning after a long absence. Later that evening, as purple shadows stretched across Redemption's main street, Mason rode out to what everyone still called the Cursed Woman's Cabin. Gunderson had already begun improvements, but the small garden Eliza had tended remained untouched, vibrant with late summer blooms. He dismounted, running his fingers over the rough-hewn porch railing where he'd first recognized something regal in her bearing. The door remained splintered from Montgomery's men, hanging crookedly on damaged hinges. Inside, twilight filtered through dirty windows, illuminating the simple space that had sheltered a princess. Most of her few possessions were gone, either and taken by her royal guard or looted after word of her true identity spread. But in the small hearth, something caught his eye, a glint of gold partially hidden by ashes. Mason knelt, carefully extracting a delicate chain bearing a locket. The clasp had been damaged, revealing a miniature portrait inside. A handsome older man with Eliza's same determined eyes, wearing a crown. Her father, the king. She must have hidden it during the struggle or perhaps lost it in the chaos. Either way, it was a tangible piece of her story, something personal beyond official letters and royal commendations. Mason closed the locket, feeling like an intruder in her private world. He pocketed it alongside the silver raven, intending to send both back to Ravenhurst with the next diplomatic courier. As he turned to leave, the fading light revealed something else. Words carved into the wooden mantelpiece, fresh enough that pale splinters still clung to the grooves. A message left for him to find. Some chains remain even when visible bonds are broken. But remember this, even a caged bird may someday fly free. Mason traced the words with his fingertips, recognizing Eliza's formal script. Not a lover's promise, but something perhaps more meaningful, a recognition of shared understanding. They were both bound by duties and expectations, living lives not entirely of their own choosing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The first snow of winter dusted Redemption 3 months later, transforming the dusty frontier town into something almost beautiful. Mason had signed the contract, committed to seeing the town through its growing pains. The silver mine operated modestly under territorial supervision, providing steady work without the false promises Montgomery had dangled. Old Gunderson had become something of a local celebrity once the full story spread, proudly recounting to anyone who'd listen how he'd sheltered royalty right under Montgomery's nose. He'd renamed his property Princess Haven and planned to build a proper boarding house for respectable women traveling through Redemption. Mason had sent the locket back to Ravenhurst with an official territorial delegation, along with a brief, formal note explaining where he'd found it. He'd kept the silver raven, though, sometimes carrying it in his pocket when nights grew long and the weight of his badge felt particularly heavy. The telegram came on the coldest day of December, delivered by a breathless Billy who'd run all the way from the telegraph office. "Urgent," Billy gasped, thrusting the yellow paper into Mason's hands. Operator said it came through 3 relay stations with highest priority. Mason unfolded it with steady fingers that belied his quickening pulse. Sheriff Reed, Stop Royal. Delegation arriving Redemption December 20. Stop accommodations. Required 3 days. Stop diplomatic matter. Highest importance. Stop no signature, but none was needed. Only one royal delegation would have business in Redemption. She's coming. Back, Billy said, reading over Mason's shoulder. The princess! The princess! Maybe, Mason tempered the boy's enthusiasm. Could be just her representatives. But Billy's excitement proved contagious throughout Redemption. The town council convened an emergency session, allocating funds to spruce up the main street. The Faja hotel owner began renovating his finest suite. Women gathered to sew new curtains for the community hall. Men repaired boardwalks and painted storefronts that had needed attention for years. You'd think the president himself was visiting, Mason remarked to Gunderson as they watched the flurry of activity. Better than that, the old man chuckled. Presidents come and go, but stories about a princess who lived among them? Folks'll tell. Those forever. He nudged Mason with a bony elbow, especially ones with a bit of romance thrown in. There wasn't any romance, Mason corrected him sharply. Gunderson's knowing smile was infuriating. That why you've been carrying that? Silverbird everywhere since she left? Mason had no answer for that. The royal delegation arrived with considerably more fanfare than Eliza had the first time. 6 identical black carriages with the Ravenhurst crest emblazoned in gold on their doors rolled down Redemption's main street, escorted by mounted royal guardsmen whose polished armor reflected the winter sun. The entire town turned out to witness the spectacle. Children perched on parents' shoulders for a better view, women in their Sunday best, despite it being Thursday, men removing hats as the procession passed. Mason waited on the steps of the newly painted town hall, wearing the formal black suit the council had insisted upon, rather than his usual sheriff's attire. Only his badge and gun belt remained as symbols of his office. The lead carriage stopped directly before him. A footman in elaborate livery jumped down to open the door and place a set of small gold steps beneath it. Mason held his breath, uncertain what or who to expect. A man emerged first, elderly, dignified, dressed in dark blue robes trimmed with ermine. The Lord Chancellor from the letter, Mason guessed. The old man surveyed the gathered crowd with a practiced diplomatic smile. Before turning back to assist the next passenger, a gloved hand appeared, delicate but strong, accepting the Chancellor's assistance. Then Eliza herself stepped down. No, not Eliza anymore, Mason reminded himself. Princess Elizabeth of Ravenhurst. She wore a traveling ensemble of deep green velvet that complemented her eyes, her dark hair arranged beneath a small hat adorned with a single raven feather. A far cry from the cursed woman in her threadbare shawl, yet somehow still the same person who had faced down Montgomery with unflinching courage. Their eyes met across the short distance, and for a fleeting moment Mason glimpsed something beneath her royal composure, a flash of the woman who had carved a message into a humble cabin mantelpiece. Then her public mask returned as she acknowledged the cheering crowd with a gracious nod before ascending the town hall steps. Sheriff Reed, she said, her voice carrying just enough for those nearest to hear. We meet again under happier circumstances. Mason bowed slightly, conscious of the watching crowd. Your Highness, Redemption is honored by your presence. The honor is mine, she replied, then added more softly, as is the pleasure of seeing you well. The formalities of welcome occupied the next hour. Introductions to the town council, a tour of the hall, the presentation of ceremonial gifts. Through it all, Mason remained nearby as dictated by protocol, hyper-aware of her presence yet unable to speak privately. Finally, as the reception concluded and guests began to disperse, the Lord Chancellor approached Mason. Her Highness requests, a moment of your time, Sheriff, alone. The old man's expression revealed nothing. For matters of diplomatic sensitivity, Mason was led to a small anteroom where Eliza waited, her retinue dismissed. When the door closed behind him, she turned from the window where she'd been gazing out at the snow-covered town. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then her formal demeanor softened into a genuine smile. "Mason," she said simply, his name on her lips somehow more intimate than any embrace. "Your Highness," he replied, still conscious of propriety. "Please, not when we're alone." She stepped closer. "I've heard enough royal titles these past months to last a lifetime." "Eliza, then." He hesitated. "I didn't expect to see you again." "Nor I you. But circumstances change." She glanced down. "I received the locket. Thank you for returning it." "Of course." Mason shifted uncomfortably, feeling the silver raven pin heavy in his pocket. "Your father is well, though furious about Krovgorod's duplicity. The treaty has been nullified. There will be no forced marriage." Relief flooded through him, surprising in its intensity. "I'm glad." "As am I." She moved to a small table where a folder of documents lay. "But that's not why I've come." "Official business?" Mason guessed. Yes and no. She opened the folder, revealing maps of the territory. "These are preliminary surveys conducted by Ravenhurst geologists. Montgomery wasn't entirely wrong about the value of this land, just not for the reasons he thought." Mason studied the maps, noting areas marked in red. "I don't understand." "Rare earth minerals," Eliza explained, "essential for advanced metallurgy and scientific research. Ravenhurst seeks exclusive rights to develop these deposits, with fair compensation to territorial authorities and local landowners." "And you came personally to negotiate this?" Mason couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. Her eyes flashed with familiar defiance. "I insisted. My father was reluctant given what happened before, but I persuaded him that I know this territory and its people in ways no diplomat could." She straightened. "I am to be crowned within the year. This will be my first major achievement as crown princess, establishing mutually beneficial relations between Ravenhurst and American territories." Mason nodded slowly, understanding the political significance. "Congratulations on your upcoming coronation." "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "There is one more matter. A personal request. Anything." She withdrew another document from the folder. "Ravenhurst will need a permanent representative here to oversee our interests. Someone who understands both frontier justice and diplomatic protocol." Her eyes met, his directly. "Someone I trust implicitly." Mason felt his world tilt slightly. "You're offering me a position?" "Royal envoy to the Western Territories." She handed him the document, a formal commission bearing the king's seal. "You would retain your sheriff's duties if you wish, while serving as Ravenhurst's official representative with diplomatic status." The offer stunned him. "Why me?" "Because you saw me, truly saw me, when I was nothing more than a suspected witch in a backwater town." Her voice softened. "And because some stories deserve a chance to continue, even when their beginning seemed impossible." Mason looked down at the commission, then back at the woman who had entered his life as a mystery and now offered him a bridge between their worlds. "I'll need time to consider," he said finally. "Of course." She nodded, professional. "Once more, the delegation remains 3 days. I hope to have your answer before we depart." As she moved toward the door, Mason reached into his pocket, withdrawing the silver raven pin. "You might want this back," he said, extending it toward her. "Since I haven't earned it yet." Eliza looked at the pin, then gently closed his fingers around it. "Keep it. Whether you accept the position or not, you've more than earned the right to carry a piece of Ravenhurst with you." Her hand lingered on his. "And a piece of me." In that touch, brief, proper yet charged with unspoken possibility, lay the promise of a story still unfolding. Not a fairy tale of princesses and common men defying convention, but something rarer. Two people who had seen each other's true nature across boundaries of station and circumstance, finding unexpected common ground. "Until tomorrow, Sheriff Reed," she said formally as the door opened to readmit her retinue. "Until tomorrow, Your Highness," he replied, the silver raven warm in his palm. A token of what had been, and perhaps what might yet be. Perhaps what might yet be. Perhaps the moon hung full and white above Redemption's rooftops, casting long shadows across the snow-covered main street. Mason stood alone on the balcony of the town hall, watching his breath cloud in the frigid air. Below, the last of the evening's celebration was winding down, townspeople still dazed from dining and dancing alongside royalty. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "Quite different from my first reception here," Eliza said, stepping from the shadows to join him at the railing. She'd exchanged her formal dinner gown for something simpler, though still finer than anything available in Redemption. Her guards remained at a discreet distance inside, giving them the illusion of privacy. "No one's calling you cursed now," Mason observed. "Amazing what a royal title and a few carriages will do." "People see what they expect to see." She glanced back toward the hall, where the territorial governor was still deep in conversation with her chancellor. "My father's court is no different, just better dressed in their judgments." 2 days had passed since she'd offered him the position of royal envoy. 2 days of formal dinners, treaty discussions, and carefully maintained public appearances. 2 days of stolen glances across crowded rooms and words unspoken. "You haven't given me your answer," she said, her breath forming delicate wisps between them. Mason's hand moved to his pocket, feeling the silver raven pin he'd carried since her departure. "I've been thinking on it, and got some concerns." He turned to face her directly. "Diplomatic immunity, special treatment. Sounds a lot like what Montgomery had. Power without accountability." Eliza's eyes narrowed. "You're comparing a royal appointment to Montgomery's corruption?" "No," Mason said carefully. "I'm saying I became sheriff to uphold the law equally for everyone. Don't know that I can serve two masters. Even if one of those masters is me." There was a challenge in her voice, a flash of the woman who'd survived alone in a hostile town. "Especially if it's you," he admitted quietly. The raw honesty silenced her. Below them, the last revelers departed the town hall, leaving the street, empty except for the royal guards patrolling its perimeter. "I have something for you," he said finally, reaching into his coat to withdraw a small wooden box. "Found it among Montgomery's effects, after everything settled." Eliza accepted the box, cautiously. Inside, nestled on a scrap of velvet, lay a tarnished brass key. "What does it open?" she asked. "Safety deposit box at the Redemption Bank. Seems Montgomery kept insurance against his partners." Mason leaned against the railing. "Documents detailing Gravgarod's involvement in your abduction, including communications with someone inside your father's court." Her fingers closed around the key, knuckles whitening. "You've seen these documents, enough to know they'd cause a diplomatic incident if made public, enough to know you're still in danger, even with a crown on your head. Why are you giving this to me now? Why not sooner? Wasn't sure who to trust, even among your people." Mason held her gaze steady. "Still not sure, but figured you should know there's a traitor close to your father." A complex series of emotions crossed Eliza's face: shock, anger, calculation, and finally a grim resolve that reminded Mason of the woman who'd faced down Montgomery with bound hands. "The Duke couldn't have managed this without inside help," she said, almost to herself. "Someone with access to my travel plans, my route." Her eyes sharpened. "This changes everything. Figured it might." I'll need to return immediately before the coronation preparations advance further. She slipped the key into her bodice. Mason, She stopped, searching his face. Thank you isn't enough. Wasn't looking for thanks. No, she agreed. You never were. The night air grew colder around them, the distance between princess and sheriff both physical and unbridgeable. Your offer, Mason said, the envoy position. I need to decline. Though she nodded as if expecting this answer, disappointment shadowed her eyes. May I ask why? Redemption needs me, especially now with the railroad coming. He straightened, squaring his shoulders. And you need someone who can move freely. In royal circles, who knows the players? That's not me. It could be, she challenged. You adapt quickly. Maybe? A smile touched his lips. But then who'd keep Billy from shooting himself in the foot? Her answering smile held genuine warmth. He's fortunate to have you as a mentor. From inside came the discreet cough of her chancellor, signaling the lateness of the hour. I leave at first light, she said, regret coloring her words. The documents you've discovered make haste essential. Mason nodded, knowing this goodbye was likely their last. Yet instead of the desolation he'd expected, he felt a curious peace. Their paths had crossed against all probability, changed each other irrevocably, and now diverged again as they must. Princess, he said formally, tipping his hat. Sheriff, she replied with equal formality, though her eyes spoke volumes more. She turned to go, then hesitated, hand resting on the doorframe. Without looking back, she added softly, the position remains open, should you ever reconsider. Dawn broke cold and clear, painting Redemption's weathered buildings in pale gold. The royal carriages stood ready, breath from the matched black horses forming clouds in the frigid air. Mason watched from the jailhouse porch, deliberately distant from the small crowd gathered to witness the delegation's departure. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As the princess emerged from the hotel, resplendent in traveling clothes that cost more than most Redemption residents earned in a year, a hush fell over the onlookers. She paused at the lead carriage, scanning the crowd until her gaze found Mason. With a barely perceptible nod, she acknowledged him before allowing her chancellor to hand her into the carriage. The procession departed with the same ceremony that had marked its arrival, leaving only hoofprints in the snow and stories that would grow taller with each telling. Billy appeared at Mason's elbow, uncharacteristically subdued. Reckon that's that then? Reckon so, Mason agreed, turning back toward his office. You didn't go say goodbye proper. Already did in our way. Billy frowned. Thought maybe, well, with all them glances between you two at the dinner. Life. Ain't a dime novel, deputy. Mason settled behind his desk, pulling paperwork toward him. Best remember that. Weeks passed, then months. Spring came early that year, transforming Redemption's muddy streets into dusty thoroughfares almost overnight. The railroad construction brought new faces to town. Workers, engineers, speculators, drawn by rumors of mineral deposits. Mason maintained order with quiet efficiency, training Billy to handle the growing complexities of law enforcement in a changing frontier. If he sometimes stood too long at his office window, gazing eastward, no one remarked upon it. The package arrived on the anniversary of Montgomery's death, a small wooden crate bearing the Ravenhurst royal seal. Mason opened it alone in his quarters, carefully prying loose the lid to reveal its contents. Nestled in straw lay a newspaper, the Ravenhurst Royal Gazette, its front page dominated by an illustration of Princess Elizabeth's coronation. The accompanying article detailed the ceremony, including the surprising arrest of Lord Harrington, the King's closest advisor, for treason and conspiracy with foreign powers. Beneath the newspaper lay a small velvet pouch containing a gold signet. ring bearing the Ravenhurst crest and a handwritten note in familiar, elegant script. Truth like cream eventually rises. The documents you provided revealed corruption that reached the highest levels of court. Harrington has confessed to orchestrating my disappearance in exchange for Krovgorod mining rights. My father, impressed by American frontier justice, has expanded the royal envoy position into a permanent diplomatic mission. The enclosed ring confirms your authority should you ever choose to accept. Some people see only what they expect, others see what truly exists. You saw me when I was invisible. With gratitude and regard that transcends circumstance. E. Mason slipped the ring onto his finger, its weight unfamiliar yet somehow right. Outside, Redemption continued its transformation from frontier outpost to proper town. The railroad would arrive within weeks, bringing the outside world ever closer to their doorstep. Perhaps, he thought, staring at the gold ring catching the afternoon light, the distance between worlds was closing in more ways than one. 5 years passed before Princess Elizabeth returned to American soil, this time with full diplomatic entourage and extensive press coverage. Now Queen Elizabeth Furbyne of Ravenhurst, she came to inaugurate the Royal Scientific Academy, established on former Montgomery lands, a joint venture between her kingdom and the newly incorporated state. Mason, silver threaded through his dark hair, after years of frontier peacekeeping, stood among the dignitaries on the Academy steps. The gold signet ring, polished for the occasion, gleamed on his hand. Her royal procession approached with all the pomp her station demanded. When she emerged from her carriage, the crowd fell silent. No longer the cursed woman, nor even the princess who had briefly walked among them. She had become a monarch in full possession of her power, regal, assured, commanding. As protocol dictated, the governor spoke first, then various officials. Finally, it was Mason's turn to welcome her officially in his capacity as regional authority. He stepped forward, conscious of the carefully maintained distance between them. Your Majesty, on behalf of Redemption County, I bid you welcome. Their eyes met as he bowed, and for an instant the years fell away. She was again the woman in the threadbare shawl with defiant eyes. He was the sheriff who had recognized her worth beneath the disguise. Sheriff Reed, she acknowledged, her voice carrying to the assembled crowd. We are pleased to see Redemption flourishing under your continued guidance. The formal words masked the private message that passed between them, an understanding deeper than titles or circumstance could touch. Later, after the speeches and ribbon-cutting, after the crowds dispersed and the formal banquet concluded, a messenger appeared at Mason's door with a royal summons. He found her in the Academy's observation tower, royal guards dismissed to the stairwell, gazing out at the transformed landscape. The silver mine that had once been Montgomery's obsession now served as part of the Academy's practical education program. Sheriff, she said without turning. Or should I say, County Commissioner now. Mason will do fine, he replied, coming to stand beside her. When it's just us. She smiled then, the formal mask dropping away. Is it ever just us, truly? Even here, I brought a kingdom with me. And I've got an entire county downstairs wondering what their commissioner is discussing with a foreign queen. Her laugh was genuine, a sound he'd treasured in memory through the years of silence. We've both come far from that first meeting. You more than me. I'm still keeping the peace in the same town. Don't underestimate what you've built here. She gestured toward the settlement sprawling below, now a proper city with gas lamps and paved streets. Redemption has become a model for development here throughout the territory. Had help. Mason touched the signet ring he'd worn since receiving it. The Academy will change things even more. For the better, I hope. She turned to face him fully. The mineral exploration program will create Opportunities beyond anything Montgomery could have imagined, and without the exploitation he intended. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who had seen each other's true selves across boundaries of station and circumstance. "I received your letters," she said finally. "All of them." Mason nodded. The correspondence had begun tentatively. A year after her first departure, formal, carefully worded communications regarding territorial development. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, personal notes had been added, observations about changing seasons, memories of shared moments, never declarations or promises, but something perhaps more valuable, honest connection between two people whose lives had irrevocably touched. "Never expected replies," he said. "Figured a queen has more important matters. You'd be surprised what becomes important when one wears a crown." She moved to the railing, her profile limned in the setting sun. The Academy's construction provides a legitimate reason for regular diplomatic contact between Ravenhurst and this region, meaning I shall return periodically to oversee our investment. Her eyes met his, direct as always. "And meaning you have reason to visit Ravenhurst as the local authority responsible for our shared interests." Mason understood the careful diplomacy of her words, the doors being opened without impropriety or impossible promises. They were still sheriff and royal, still bound by duties and separated by station. But perhaps the boundaries between their worlds could become more permeable with time. "Been meaning to see how that parliamentary system of yours works," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. "Might be educational." "Indeed, we value education highly in Ravenhurst." Her answering smile held warmth that belied her formal words. "The Academy's exchange program welcomes qualified officials. Below them, the first of Redemption's gas lamps flickered to life against the gathering dusk. No longer a frontier outpost, but a city with prospects beyond what anyone had imagined when a cursed woman first arrived at its station. "They still tell stories about you, you know," Mason said. "The mysterious woman who brought both trouble and transformation. Some still claim you were a witch." "Perhaps I was, in a way." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "I certainly cast a spell over one lawman." "That you did, Your Majesty." Mason touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. "That you certainly did." As evening deepened around them, Sheriff and Queen stood side by side, watching the town that had both cursed and blessed them transform in the gathering darkness. Not a fairy tale ending of impossible love, but something rarer and perhaps more precious, a connection that had weathered separation and circumstance, honest and enduring. Between them lay possibility, not the fevered romance of dime novels, but the measured understanding of two people who had seen each other's true nature across all boundaries and found something worth preserving despite the distance. Some stories don't end. They simply change, like redemption itself, into something new, yet rooted in what came before. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.